Whoop, and we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm Isaac Young, author of The Last Human and other works. And I have with me today Son of Sonnet, who's been a voice actor I've collaborated with for a very long time. He's done fabulous work. Son of Sonnet, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Isaac. Yes, my name is Son of Sonnet. You can call me Sonnet or Tat or whatever. At any rate, I am a voice actor, audiobook narrator, and sometimes poet, although I don't really charge for poetry. At any rate, I am very happy to work with Isaac, and it's been a few years, really, but I think the first thing we worked on was it a trailer for the Domes of Calrathia?
I think, yeah, that might have been the first thing that we worked on.
Yeah, it was a nice build up, but honestly, I've been so immersed in the recent stories and current projects that I just kind of forgot where we started or how we met, because it's just like an organic part of my home or something. Like, oh, there's the Isaac section. But at any rate, very happy to work with you now and for any future projects that we work on.
Yeah. So I guess for listeners of The Last Human, the big question is, when will season 3 come out? I believe Son of Sonnet has an opening in September. So that's going to be, we're going to try and get it out as early as possible. He's currently with other projects. And that'll hopefully allow me to build up more of a backlog for season 4 and such. But I guess this is a live stream to just talk about The Last Human, talk about all the things about it and its production, both the book and the audio show. So I guess Son of Sonnet, uh, what struck you about the series? This is a this is a question authors love to ask, is because I finally have a captive audience here to ask what their thoughts are about my book.
Indeed, you can hear my chains rattling in the background.
uh,
But what struck me about it? Like
I
my
guess
what's my impression of it?
impressions, anything particular, and we can go from there.
Well, I will. I'll be as be. I'll try to be honest, and I hope nothing. And I'm sometimes bad with input because I worry. You know, when I'm back as early as high school, when I was asked to give not advice but like critiques from people. Sometimes I'd give the critiques, and then they would just stop doing whatever they were doing. We were doing a variety show one time, and there were these two students that were like freshmen or whatever. They really wanted to sing in front of a crowd, and I was just being run crew for the event or whatever, running some tech. And they were singing, and I was just kind of watching. They asked, and I gave my respectful observations, and then they didn't end up performing. They decided that my feedback struck a little too hard. I think
No
with
worries.
The Last Human, I I don't want to downplay the Domes of Calrathia too much, but to me, it feels a bit more like a more realized idea of the Domes of Calrathia. Like it's an extension of that work, but but more refined, more focused on what it's trying to accomplish and how. So with the Domes of Calrathia, it feels like an attempt at the Odyssey in a way. And I don't want to critique too hard because it's a good book. But there is there are, it's an overall grand story with a lot of diversions. And each of those diversions you can discuss about the merit that they add to the overall whole. But there are some that are more significant than others, such as the court intrigue with Messalina and Berenice. And I find that ultimately became the heart of the book, that the interaction with that family and with Berenice and in particular, but also that the protagonist's relationship with them, and then it became a bit more like a story about men and women and certain expectations that you have for relationships, or like what is the core of that, and even kind of removing the sexual component and just kind of acknowledging the chaste affection that the protagonist Cirrus and Berenice have for each other, um, it fulfills itself in a nice way by the end. But I think it sort of became something else. And I think they're diverting now a little bit, where they have their own directions that they can go in with what they are. But I think at their core, at least what the Domes of Calrathia is supposed to be, feels a bit like the same heart, the same core as The Last Human. But I think The Last Human is fleshing that out and is kind of going in the intended direction without any diversions. So I haven't seen anything that's telling me, oh no, this is now the story that I don't mean to be disrespectful. It's like sometimes
No
sometimes
worries.
an author is writing something and it's like what the book is supposed to be about, but then they have like a side story that comes in and they get really engaged in that side story, and that becomes a bit more of a heart of that individual set of papers. So that book becomes like the heart of that book becomes like this interaction, this relationship here. Like the biggest example is probably The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Mark Twain, just because what people kind of gravitate towards is that relationship between Huckleberry Finn and Jim, and then culminating in that scene with "I'll go to hell," and that's like the highlight that everyone remembers and what they take with them. But ultimately, I think Mark Twain still kind of really loves the adventures of Tom Sawyer and these childish, boyish adventures, and that's why the end of that book is still kind of like a recall to that original story. And so, when you go to an English class, they kind of rag on the last portion of that book because it's refocusing itself back to what it kind of wants to be, I think. Uh, so, at any rate, I'm happy. I'm happy with The Last Human. I'm interested to see how it goes. And later on, I think we're going to eventually get back to the Domes of Calrathia sequel, but I am curious how that one will be fleshed out as well.
Yeah, I would say the Domes of Karathi is a lot more experimental. It was me. I think that was the first story I ever wrote in first person. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that was me trying out a bunch of literary techniques and styles, just to see what works and what didn't. It was a very, yeah, it was very going out there and being risky. The Last Human is a lot more just taking lessons learned from that project and basically simplifying the formula down enough. Because the last human, like it's there's no there's like one dream sequence, but there's none of the side stories that you mentioned. There's none of the diversions in the plot. It's just full on chapter. I kind of made a rule for myself that every chapter had to progress the plot in some way.
Yeah,
Like there
I
has
think
to
that was a good
be,
rule.
yeah, like it has to make an obvious impact on the plot, instead of doing content that thematically fits into the work but doesn't have any obvious plot ramifications.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I think that was a good choice.
yeah.
The
And oh, sorry.
the
You can
diversions
continue.
the diversions were still entertaining in Domes of Calrathi in their own way, but they could create an effect on the pacing.
Yeah,
Um,
I
and
was.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was me trying to be a little bit like Gene Wolfe from Book of the New Sun. He has quite a few of those diversions, and they're great, but they're not exactly. They're much harder to get into.
Mm-mm.
They require a lot more investment from the reader than just casual, off the cuff narration, which is a lot more what the last human is.
Yeah, when there's a diversion with the first person narration in The Last Human, it's more of a tease for some future event that we could eventually see. The second conquering of Oberon species. I forget their name. I'm sorry. Um, but like, because it's the lesser, they call this event the lesser humbling and everything. It's a nice little tease. Like, because from what I remember, The Last Human is kind of like the forever story. That is a terrible thing for me to say, but I remember you wanted this to kind of go on for as long as it could. And while it's still, I'm sure while it's still meaningful, I don't think you're going to go on like Simpsons and then have like a bad tail end or whatever. But it seems like this is the grand epic that you want to tell.
Yeah,
Uh,
I kind of so here's I wanted a grand epic, yes, but I also didn't want to leave readers hanging on for an ending, like so many other authors do. I recently mentioned Patrick Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin, and them
Oh
not
yeah.
releasing their books for over a decade. I never wanted to, like, let's say, I crash out really hard sometime in the future, like they do. I the reason the reason it's sort of a memoir format is I wanted to spoil my ending immediately. And I wanted to work out what was interesting in the story besides the ending. Because
Yeah.
you know how Vass turns out. You know how the main
Yeah.
characters turn out. Um, basically you can predict a lot of what happens to the characters in the first book just by the context and implications of the setting. Um,
Yeah, I
that's
was
not what
starting
this.
to devise theories in my head before the interview. How would the overall story end? I have a few ideas, but I'm excited to see where everything goes.
Yeah.
The
So,
I'm curious if you would ever try do like there's a mangaka who writes who did Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter X Hunter, and
Hunter,
he at
Hunter.
one point, well, because he has severe back issues, like health issues that prevent him from working. So he at one point released basically just a text document and said, I have 4 endings in mind that I could build towards. And I know which one that I would prefer, but that may not be the best ending. And I'm going to try my best to flesh out the story up to this point. And he actually released that because he literally could die before he actually reaches the ending. And I'm kind of vaguely curious if you would ever do that, like release what your intended endings might be for the overall story, if like there are alternatives.
I mean, I don't feel like I need to because it's in like chapter 27, end of prologue, is a flash forward
Mm.
to present day, and I feel like that. I intend on ending every single major story arc slash book with a flash forward sequence.
Mm-mm.
And that itself will be that document that you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
instead of me like doing an out of story. Okay, here's the intended ending.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That sounds good. Um, do you have the ending? You have the ending set for The Last Human. Do you have one set for the Domes of Calrathia in a similar way?
Yeah, I do. It's just
Cool.
a matter
Cool.
of writing it and finding the time to write it.
We find our time, or we make our time, or however it works. But
Yeah.
or we just work by the grace of time, I guess.
So Paul A asks, "Can you give us a better description of English? Is she some kind of cat alien?" Actually, in my head, she's her species is descended from bats. Um, and one of the original early concepts of her that kind of fell through was her telepathy would be related to echolocation, but I just nixed that. But yeah, she's I actually have a pretty good picture. She's got big ears, small eyes, kind of a bit of a snout. Dang, I wish I could. I can't.
Yeah, the
I
bat
can't
makes
figure out a way.
sense.
Yeah,
I do like that imagery.
and that kind of fits into her blindfold. Even though she's not blind, there's a cultural reason for the blindfold.
Yeah.
The
Well, we went over that before, right? Or
it's in
is there just
chapter
more to it?
2. It's
Because
in
it
chapter
was
2.
on chapter 10 where she talks to Vass.
There's layers to English that will slowly be
Got it.
unveiled. I'm getting to the second layer to her in chapter 30, but
So,
you have a good physical description of her in chapter 2.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. She's a fun character to work with.
Yeah, she was she's interesting. Like
Every female character that I play is its own unique challenge.
Gosh. I kind of wish I had a lot of voice actors to do an ensemble cast of all the characters, but that'd be way too complicated for
I feel
this
you.
narration.
I feel you. It's best to have the as close to the accurate interpretation of the character as you can, and sometimes one person can't get all characters 100%.
Yeah.
I'll keep doing my best.
Your work so far has been absolutely terrific.
Thank you.
So out of curiosity, who's your favorite character from the story?
Favorite character or favorite voice?
Let's do both, but start with favorite character.
Sure. Amon would be my favorite character.
Oh, that's interesting.
He has, I think, ultimately, if I had an ending in mind for where the story would go, it would ultimately end with a culmination of his character, with a final important beat between him and Vass. And I think his suffering is sort of, at the moment at least, is most resonant with the heart of the narrative. And his journey seems to be, he seems to have the beginning, or the in media res, as it were, with the narrative. And then I think right now I want to see a comforting emotional resolution for his character the most. So right now, and he had a very nice fleshing out in this last season, because I was worried the first season actually about one specific thing, and it was because you had said in the narration with future Vass talking about how Aemon was his father, and I panicked a little bit, went because we were just on the first season, and I thought for a second, am I just going to be told this information, or are we going to live it? And I'm sorry that I had that doubt, but we didn't. By the end of that season, we get his relationship with Ingrish, and it's a really nice, it was a really beautiful moment. But I still thought the future Vass just told me that he saw Aemon and his father. But what I want is to feel it. I want to realize, like, the moment that Aemon is really his dad, and that they connect. And then, and I think we aren't necessarily there yet, but we got a really nice moment in Cargo Bay 13 that I thought it hit the notes that I was looking for or wanting in season one, that I was kind of afraid we might miss just because we were already told by Vass that he got it, you know? So thank you for that scene.
Yeah, I mean, the reason those passages exist in the early chapters was because I was thinking of the audio show component, right?
Yeah.
And I was trying to get as much as like what the core of the story is in front of the readers as fast as possible. So I was a lot more heavy-handed in the early chapters than I usually like to be. Um, so that's the reason for I basically state a lot of things in the first 5 chapters
Yeah.
that I would explore in great detail later in the story. But that's the reason why those passages exist.
Yeah. Every diversion or bit with future Vass talking a bit more about his accomplishments is a nice tease. But I know that sometimes an author can kind of leave that moment in the time skip, and so all the same, it was refreshing to reach that moment. I feel like we've gotten 2 moments in the story so far that resonate with me as that parent-child moment that I'm really happy with. Cargo Bay 13 is a little challenging to convey. I hope I got Aemon correctly during that scene, because he has because you just have to be able to say so much without betraying the strength of the character, his integrity. Like, because you don't really, I don't really want to make him break, but he's going to make a confession, and he has that moment in season 1 where he's talking to Vass, and Vass can't understand a single word, and I think it was a nice touch to have that moment be completely untranslated, just so that is a mystery, but we also don't necessarily need to know what he said.
Yeah, there's oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying it comes across without the specific words. It's clear enough.
Yeah, so I'm never going to tell like directly what was in that confession. And there's a second element, I believe is in chapter 18, the Fifth Aberrant War, where Vass outlines 2 out of 3 arguments why Ingrish would essentially risk his life on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's related to the confession. And that third argument is not going to be like explicitly stated, but I am going to explain it in chat. Well, I did explain it in, I believe it was chapter 25.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
There's there's a lot of components to the characters that I slowly unravel over the course of the story.
Yeah, it's
And
been good to get to know them over time.
yeah, so
Favorite?
Amon's. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
So
No, go
Amon's
ahead.
gonna have a much darker moment in chapter 25, but as
He's
if
already
the
had so
story
many
isn't
dark
dark
moments.
enough.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah, just
didn't.
turning him into that suit wasn't traumatizing enough for the man or for anyone watching. My goodness.
um,
Um,
yeah. There's
yeah.
actually there's a second layer and reason for the carapace suit. I am curious how much it got across to the audience, but I'll ask if you caught it. Um,
You want
so
me to suppose right now, or do you want to just go ahead and explain?
well, I was going to explain it and then
Go
ask
ahead.
you how much of it came across.
Yeah, cool.
So, season one had to do a lot with the introduction of words, their meanings, and basically Bass's introduction into a relationship. And I wanted to discuss alongside that growth in his vocabulary, just the theme of language itself and what it represents. And then in season two, I developed that theme into exploring what stories are and what art is, and our relationship to it. And I kind of took so with Oberon, he puts forward a very, in my view, a very nihilistic philosophy of life, where he's trying to basically become an actor in a living story. Um, and try and find meaning in that. And what he does to Amon is something that's very cruel. He takes him and like he's not the creator of the carapace suit by any means, but basically what he attempts to do to Amon is to take him and hollow him out and use him for his own end in the story he's weaving for himself. And Cargo Bay 13 was a rebuttal of that. Amon doesn't need an honored storyteller. He's already, he's got a life, a very storied life too, and he's not this dull thing that Oberon kind of wants him to be. But I don't know how much of that came across.
I think it was, well, I think it was clear enough. It was sort of the bones of the whole thing. In terms of that statement of he doesn't need an honored storyteller, I suppose that would be you as the writer, ultimately.
Yeah, that's Oberon's also a bit of a. He's not a representation of me, but he's a kind of representation for a certain type of author.
It came across as well, the extent of the modifications certainly came across with how much of his humanity seems to be stripped from him, and how tragic that is, and to not even really be able to speak and everything. So I think that is a strong connection between the two, and with his history being so clear and full, like there is almost a lack of words to convey everything that is there, to encapsulate that in a nice compact package. I think that all of that came across. Yeah, it was not. It wasn't something. I'll be honest. I didn't spend too much time on that point, mulling over that. But yes, I think it's clear. In terms of favorite voice, if I didn't have to keep adjusting my volume every time I do it because of the way the effect works, Riker is probably the most fun voice, I guess.
uh,
Just because it's more of a meme voice, though. but I do like talking like him and get to learn more about his character and all that. And he's got a certain wit to him that only a giant bird man can have.
uh, I snatched the character of Riker from the Uplift trilogy.
Hmm.
He's not a parallel with any character in that story, but I like the idea of bird aliens, um, which do make an appearance, and I wanted to make one a side character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to see. It's good to see one because I think the last bird aliens that I remember were supposed to be the Turians in the Mass Effect series, but
I
then they
never
got.
saw them as birds.
That's the thing. They were supposed to be birds, but then they modeled the faces after cats or something. So
No, it
they just
wasn't
completely
cat. It was
messed it
like
up.
I always took the Turians as lizards. To be
Oh yeah,
honest, like I thought those were scales.
I'm
And
glad that they were sufficiently alien that we
yeah,
can have that debate. But yeah.
yeah. I try to. That actually brings me up to another topic. Yeah, I try to. The Last Human, I wanted all of my aliens to be really, really out there, and I didn't want them to be number one. I didn't want them to feel like Star Trek aliens, where they're just a people in with various facial makeup on. Um,
Hmm.
and I didn't want them to be. There's this trope called I forget the actual specific term, but there's this trope where you have races that fit into stereotypes, like the Klingons are the warrior culture,
Yeah, yeah.
the Vulcans are the logical culture. Um, and I didn't want any of my species to kind of fall into those stereotypes. I didn't want to have like a warrior culture specifically, or at least any of the easy ones. Like you have the Ferengi or the
Yeah,
merchants,
yeah.
yada yada yada.
Yeah, it's nice to
Um,
see variety.
yeah,
To
so
answer a quick question in the chat, I have not read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
I read the first one, and then sometime in the second or third book, I kind of lost interest because
Hmm.
it's his writing style. The jokes are great, but for some reason, I had a lot of trouble visualizing the time and place of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hmm.
Um, the first book was fine. The second and third book, I just didn't feel he had a lot in the way of descriptions. And
Gotcha.
so the story just became slowly more and more abstract until I don't know, I kind of just lost interest in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back to that point about Amon being turned into the pawn, it is sort of ironic, and ultimately that Oberyn's what the Rodeshi that the Rodeshi are so obsessed with telling stories or whichever, and the grandiosity of the whole thing that they just want their pawns to literally be hollowed out and into nothing. That it it does lose the core of that story. It is nice to.
Yeah,
It's
there's
a nice juxtaposition.
yeah, I kind of wish I spent more time with Oberyn and just the Rodeshi point of view, because those elements, Paul A makes the point that those points are made in abstract.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that's true. I wish I could have more viscerally done it, but this is sort of coming into like the restrictions I kind of placed myself, biting me in the back sometimes. Um, where I have to, in order to write a scene with Oberyn, I have to justify why Vass is there.
Yeah.
In order for him to be there, and have him in the physical room. And I honestly could not make another justification for him to be there.
At
Um,
one point in this story, you're going to have like some freakish alien device that will be described in the most horrible way that only you can do, where it's like he has part of his brain hooked up to someone else's brain. Like he'll have like a lobotomy, and like his brain tissue will be in Ingrish's head or something. And then he'll watch a scene that she's in, and then his brain will be put back in his head or something.
yeah,
Uh,
actually, there would be no justification for Ingrish
right.
except when she goes off to kill Oberyn. And then I explicitly had his death off screen.
Yeah.
Um, in order, I could have portrayed it, I think, in discussing with English, and maybe I will down the line. Um, but I deliberately left
That
his death off screen because
yeah.
I feel like that would have been a fitting end for someone who's trying to live their life out in the most dramatic way possible.
Yeah. He wants his names in the paper and he just kind of subtly dies. And he's gone.
Yeah.
He's not in like a yeah, not like a huge beat in the story. No, I think he died in the right way. I don't I would feel a little weird if Inger started bringing that up in conversation for whatever reason. Or at least particularly with Vass to explain this was the hello my dear son, this is the
Here's
process I
how
went
I
through
kill him.
to kill someone.
Uh,
Unless it was like, I don't know, if I was a writer and I had to think of a reason, it would be something like, we're going to go into battle. I need you to understand what you might have to do. And this is an example of a kill that I engaged in or whatever.
um,
But even then, it's kind of like a mother should not talk about certain things with
yeah,
her
yeah,
son.
yeah, yeah. That's um. So yeah, there's in chapter 30 is going to be the introduction of it. But the next 10 chapters, 31 through 40, is going to explore a different aspect of telepathy that I hadn't before.
Hmm.
And I mentioned earlier that she took with her a poison. I didn't mention what kind of poison, and this is something I really like to do with The Last Human. Is I like to introduce a concept to the reader and then invert it into something they didn't expect down the line. Like, for example, Amon enters the Death Games initially, and that's told in like chapter 8 or 9. And then you think he's a player, but no, he's actually a piece. Here's the actual player. Stuff like that. And one concept that's going to be that I've hinted at is the idea of mind poisons, where what happens is a telepath implants a thought into another person, and basically it drives them insane, and they go into death and comatose. And that's a similar thing to what Orotech was about, which is mentioned in chapter 18, and basically hints at his capabilities. But yeah, that's going to be explored much more in depth.
That'll be interesting. That's a very difficult device to use.
It is.
You could create a sense of paranoia with the reader. That suddenly the narration may no longer be trustworthy.
Yeah, I'm not going to really go down that road in terms of unreliable narrator. Mostly because it works in a story like Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe because it's very contained. But for an overarching narrative like this, where I'm aiming for like a lot of chapters, that's not a great idea. That's not a great foundation to build your story on.
Right. Do you think you would ever have future Vass take an excerpt of someone else's account and put it into his?
That might be something I play with down the line. I don't have any plans for it right now. But I always sort of like to expand the narrative in those sorts of ways. I just need to get to a point where it would be interesting to do that and where it adds.
Hopefully, it would be a meaningful diversion, a meaningful change in the context.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know how you would do that.
I mean, it would have to be in a sense where it not only makes sense for the story, but it reveals something about Vass that I want to convey to the audience. And
I know what I would do. I know what I would do. Is it okay if I share?
Yeah, sure.
If I were writing the character, I would. This would be very far in the future. But if it were the character eventually getting married, I would have him put his wife's words instead of his.
That's an interesting thought. I do have plans for a romantic relationship way down the line, but that's going to be after. It's going to be way after the family arc comes to its tragic
we don't need
conclusion.
to jump that far ahead right now.
I have plans
be too
for
eager
it.
Of us.
Yeah,
that'll be interesting to see develop over time. It did seem to be implied. I'm not asking you to answer, but it did seem to be implied that he ends up having a kid at some point.
Yeah, that's I believe you're referencing, I think it was
He says he
chapter
has
7.
experience with children,
Yeah,
but
that's
it's
that's
not in.
actually that's actually my hint. He will have a kid at some point. But that was intended as a not so subtle hint that he is going to find a way to restore humanity.
Gotcha. Uh, the disclaimer to the audience that all plans spoken now are works in progress, and are subject to change. Uh, but yeah, that would be a nice, fulfilling beat for him to reach. Part of me had that cynical expectation that all the human beings on Sanctuary are just going to die.
Oh well,
And I hope not, but I kind of think that they are.
yeah.
You don't answer it. Don't answer it.
Nothing good is. I will. I like answering these because I like spoilers. I'm a person who loves spoilers. I'm
Me
that
too.
one person. But nothing good is gonna happen to Sanctuary.
Oh gosh.
Uh,
Yeah, it was more that was more or less clear. The I am a bit more surprised that he will actually reboot humanity, as it were. Reboot's not a good word for it, but that he will be able to bring humanity back and everything. I think I was making a more comfortable assumption that when he becomes a conqueror, he will have some kind of other alien races that bow to him, that he's essentially earned the loyalty of, or earned the servitude of. Uh, wasn't sure how that was necessarily going to occur. That's like its own arc, or own 10 arcs or whatever. But I kind of had that assumption.
yeah. So my plan for him is so you can kind of divide his story into 3 parts, and we're still in the first part of his childhood and upbringing.
Yeah.
The second part is going to be him just completely alone in an alien galaxy,
No,
and
don't tell.
his
That is a hard spoiler.
it's not a hard spoiler. What are you
That's a
talking about?
huge spoiler.
I told the audience literally in chapter 27. I guess you haven't got to that point yet. That the thing on the Aphelion does not last.
That's all right. Yeah, I got it. I understand.
Uh,
Uh,
and then the third part is going to be a spiritual journey to discover a segment of mankind.
mm.
Obviously, that will be handled extremely delicately. I'm not going to pull oh, and here's this lost section of humanity that have always been here. I'm not going to do that. But
Battlestar Galactica.
oh gosh,
Is that what you're
don't
referring
remind
to?
me. Don't remind me about Battlestar Galactica. Oh
Man.
gosh.
I didn't want. I feel like I need to go watch the original show, and just see if it resonates more, in hindsight. But
yeah, I haven't watched the original either.
I've heard it ends in a somewhat similar way, but better. So, but anyway, yeah, I won't dredge up the Battlestar Galactica show if it's painful to talk about.
Oh, it's not painful. It's just funny.
No,
Just
yeah,
it's another disappointing thing.
You know, at least it completed.
Yeah, at least it completed. At least the authors finished it.
Yeah,
like George R. R. Martin.
Oh gosh. To extend my briefest sympathies with George R. R. Martin. I mean, it's gotta hurt when the person adapting your work gives the ending away that you were working towards, which is my assumption. Gives away the ending, but they messed up the work that it takes to build up to it, and so you can't even really give the justification.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean,
I think the idea of Bran being on the throne is pretty obvious. Once you kind of have that note, as I don't think it'll be called Bran the Broken or some nonsense like that.
Not Bran the Broken.
But I think
I pray that was not part of the notes that he gave them.
Yeah, it's such a weird structure because it's kind of like instead of the ascension of Arthur to the throne, you know, with a relationship with Merlin, it's like the idea is he's actually putting Merlin on the throne or something, and that just doesn't. It's an odd choice.
And
I would
understand.
Like to see a complete story that tries to tell that, but I'm not gonna. He's not selling me on the idea.
I mean, archetypally, it's sort of problematic because he's what George R. R. Martin is doing is he's essentially putting a technocrat, the ultimate technocrat of technocrats, on the throne. Because Brand's essentially a type of I don't want to say God King, but that's kind of what he is. He's omniscient, so he's the expert of all experts in all matters, and he can just go back in time, and just get all the knowledge he needs, right? So he's sort of a
Well,
there are discussions about how, like, will Westeros shift to a democracy? And thankfully they didn't go that route.
I don't know if that's entirely accurate. I think you're mostly right, but and from what I recall from the books, I'm not sure it's like what he's going through. I'm not sure it's something that he's actually going to master or that it's meant to be mastered. I think that's just a show creating, just messing it up. But in terms of the books, I think it's more like, I don't think it's something that he's going to like channel visions or whichever, because I don't know, you could have an idea of someone who's a leader who is divinely inspired, I guess, who will guide him in making the right decisions or something like that. It's just that but anyway, it clearly doesn't work in this specific situation. I just never had the sense that it was something he was ever going to master, like this journey into visions and the weirwoods and all that stuff. It seemed like a bunch of chaos and everything. So he might get context on the world or everything and gain wisdom on his journey. But I don't think he's ever going to have like practical, technical solutions to problems.
Yeah.
That's just my impression. Anyway, we don't need to talk about George R. R.
Nah.
What's your favorite Gene Wolfe book?
I mean, gotta be Stopping in Book the New Sun. I think it's going to be Sword of the Lictor, I think. Is that the right? Sword of the Lictor. Yeah, that's the right title. I like it because it has the fight with Baldanders in it, and that's one of my favorite scenes of the entire story. But I don't want to go on about Gene Wolfe.
I guess we can move on.
Yeah. I guess, what was your favorite chapter overall of the 20 you've done so far?
Oh, that is a tough one. This isn't necessarily a comment on the quality of writing of either chapter. It's more of just a personal note. So in terms of things that resonate with me or things I come back to that I really like in works that I do, it's either chapter 10 or it's the Cargo Bay 13 chapter, because it's those parental moments with Vass that sell those relationships to me, that justify the characters. At this point, he's had a very meaningful bonding moment with Ingrish where Vass feels appropriately like a child in that scene. Granted, he is 14, and even though he's emotionally stunted, I guess I could be picky or something and say his behavior reminds me, it evokes something more like an 8-year-old. But I feel there's enough context to justify the way he behaves, and also he seems to behave in a natural way.
So, all right. So this actually plays in a bit of the context of the story, and I'll elaborate on this. He's written like an 8-year-old, partly because of the Mansa, but also partly that's like humans live for 1,000 years in the setting. So he's kind of like, he's that, like 14 is the equivalent of 8 in the setting.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. It's appropriate for it. I think the only thing that felt off with that scene was part of the build-up where he effectively claws his arms open. His fingernails draw blood, and I thought it seemed a little extreme. But I thought it was maybe too much power or whatever. Because I remember times when I've been a teenager where I've had those intense feelings of, wouldn't it be, and in I don't know, almost farcical bit of self reflections. Like, what if I really felt as intensely as one of those characters in Dragon Ball Z who's so angry at this tragic loss that he squeezes his hands and draws blood, you know? But that's actually really, really hard to do.
Yeah, it
And
is.
so it's got that emotional intensity, but with all of that emotional intensity, there is always the juxtaposition of how actually powerless that you are. It's like you want to change something, but and sometimes it's just a physical thing around you, but it doesn't matter if you pull in Orson Welles and destroy the entire room of all your prized possessions. You're not making the change that you really want.
Yeah, there's actually a few separate reasons for why it was so extreme. Number one is that's basically like he's never like he hasn't had any experience with emotions really, except those he experienced on Guys of Six, and this thing that's eating him up inside is something that he's never ever experienced before. So it's not merely that it's powerful, it's also something that he just can't comprehend because he hasn't felt anything like it before.
Yeah.
So that was part of that. The second thing is that it might have been a tiny reference to Berserk, um, the Griffith character.
Oh yeah.
There's going to be some
That's
parallels
a reference I
between
didn't think of.
there's
Yeah.
some there's a ton of references in The Last Human.
Yeah, that's one I probably should have picked up on, because at least I have read through Berserk once. But anyway,
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels between Vass and Griffith.
mm.
He's Vass is a much
Not
Vass
the
is a
ones the
Christian.
audience is thinking about.
Yeah, no. He's not gonna. Vast is gonna be the good version of Griffith who turns down the Baelit and the God Hand,
Yeah.
and their equivalents in the setting. I always wanted to explore that type of character because I think the story would have been a lot more interesting if it was written like that.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
It'll be good to see. It'll be good to see as an alternate.
All right. Barbary asks, "What is the process for creating the voices for the characters, if and when to add effects?" So, if I can chime in on my side, I give Son of Sonnet basic direction. I know for season 2, I kind of sent you over a manuscript, and I didn't give much, partially because I was interested to see what your takes on the characters were without any input from me. I sometimes enjoy that just to see like how my characters sound in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And also I was just extremely busy at the time, and I honestly was so exhausted I couldn't give much. But yeah, I'll hand that question over to you now.
Sure. Every pre-production can be a little bit different, but ideally there would be some conversation with the author about whether they already have a voice in mind for the characters. And I usually ask if there are any special pronunciations as well, things that need to change, like Amon is spelled the same. Amon, his name is spelled the same way as Amon from Legend of Korra. So I want to make sure if the pronunciation is the same or different. And there are other details that come in that sometimes authors put into the text directly that specify how the character sounds. So there's occasionally a description of a gravelly voice, for example. There was one book that I did where I voiced a character in a specific way, and then I did a prequel to that book where the same character appears, but in that prequel, there was only in that one appearance of the book, he was described as gregarious or something similar, but in a very sociable, outgoing way. Whereas before, I had narrated him and as a more measured individual, and it was actually approved by the author as well after the performance. But sometimes there are these bits of these character beats, or the way the character is supposed to sound, that are put into the text that help inform how I'm supposed to make them sound. But a lot of it is recalling archetypes that we have, certain assumptions that we have of how characters ought to sound, not always how they will. Because in the example of pitch, pitch of your voice is determined by your testosterone at puberty. It is not based on your temperament, whether you're a warrior person. If you're a heavyweight person, it is not a given that your voice is going to be deep. But archetypally, it is sometimes, I feel, more satisfying to do that, to give the big character the low, deep, strong voice. But sometimes, because the role that they have in the story might be technical or something like that, I might gravitate instead, or be corrected, to go into a higher pitch, something more nerdy, for example. The book I'm working on right now has a more heavy set, nerdy character, and I'm giving him a bit more of a nerdy voice. But I think my instinct was to go lower before. The acting is important, so the actions the character takes. So ideally, I can get notes, see if there are any literal descriptions in the text, and I can read the scene to see how the character behaves. Because the voice that goes with the character would more nicely fit the actions that he takes. And sometimes it's more of, it could be a juxtaposition too. You can have a character who is a desk jockey. In the book I'm working on now, there's a character like that who has, in a previous book, was more of a secret government agent, as it were, more of a technical side. But I kind of just used my regular voice for the previous book. But with this one, I see that he's changing as a character, and that he's also becoming a bit more of an active force of justice. And in this case, he has a bit of a transformation and a time skip and everything. So I've given him a slightly deeper voice, and a more solid characterization with the way that he'll talk in this book. So sometimes it just depends on the nature of the character that is most necessary to accurately convey his actions and feelings in the scene. So I accept any advice from authors that they'll give, and hopefully it all turns out. And there's a lot of trial and error, especially when accents or quirks come involved, and the effects come in usually after the fact, based on the description that's in the narration for whether there's a device that allows them to speak, such as Riker, or if the voice if it's a character that is a robot, if the character has an artificial quality. Sometimes it can be an artificial addition. If I put an effect in where it might just be there to give a sense of this is not a human, where it might not technically be necessary. There's a series that I do where there's an AI that's prominent, but technically in the narration, the AI is described as adjusting its appearance and voice to match someone that whoever is personally known by who they're speaking to. So I cheated on that series a little bit, and I just gave a more standard robot voice for that specific series, and the author was okay with it. If the author had expressed any interest in me doing something more specific and refined for each character, like making up the voices of wives for every male character that this AI talks to, then I would have done that. But in that case, I just did choose the robotic AI voice, and the having that particular cadence. And then I find the appropriate filter that I have based on plugins that I've purchased or that is stock available in the custom build of Audacity that I use. Is there anything else you want me to refine about that answer?
Oh, no, that's a great answer. I think the only voice that we actually struggled with was General Chiron's, because I remember it was really gravelly, and then I asked you to adjust it to a far more robotic voice. I think that's the only one we actually
yes, that one
we had to
was,
struggle with.
Well, there were two voices that we had the most struggling with. The first was Tut, I think.
Oh yeah, Tut.
And I think what was making it a little challenging was, and this is not to knock you or anything, but the reference material that I had was for these robotic sounding characters, but I feel like but you were asking also for something really deep. But the reference material, it felt like the robotic nature was just in the reverb of the character, rather than say like the really deep essence of the deep pitch that the character reaches. But I think we ultimately found Tut, and he's got an appropriate distinction from everyone else. And then Chiron was more challenging because I had an idea for him that I did first. Then I realized as I was doing all of his lines in the later chapter that I was starting to hurt my voice, and
Oh no.
I was being
Oh,
foolish
sorry.
with the voice that I'd chosen. Not it wasn't one that I showed you. I had recorded all the lines, and I realized this voice I'm doing has too much fry. It's too rough. Sometimes voice actors just make that mistake. They choose a voice that's not healthy for them to continue on the regular. It can be fine to have some degree of grain in the voice for certain occasions. They might be sick, they might not have slept, might have a very dry mouth, all these things. But for Chiron, then I had to redo his lines, and then I sent you that, and then I got the refinement request to change it to more of the original General Grievous from the Clone Wars cartoon, which was a voice I liked. So it was fun. It was fun to try and find that nature of character, and I think ultimately it makes him more interesting of a character to interact with. He's got a villainous voice, and the juxtaposition of his noble warrior archetype, and there's a bit of a chaotic element to his character where I feel like we could trust him to be noble when it counts, but he might have differing opinions with everyone else. That might mean that he might become an antagonist depending on the circumstance.
Yeah, he's going to be a reoccurring character over the long course of the series. Unfortunately, he's a long way from his death. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
Unfortunately for him, fortunately for the audience.
Yeah. I hope he gets the satisfying conclusion to his arc, whether it's actually a death or not. It does seem like there's only one way that his story could end, which is ultimately whatever death is going to be most appropriate for his character. But if there weren't a battlefield death, I would be curious to see how that played out.
Yeah, the ending I have planned for him, and this is not a spoiler because it's very tenuous, because it's so far out. Mm-hmm. But the ending I have planned for him is he's going to be thrust between his loyalty to the Scythian people, and Vass is going to be at the height of his power at this point, and General Chiron's going to challenge Vass to a one-on-one duel, and Vass might kill him. That's a very, very tenuous plan that I have because I just there's going to be so much in between those 2 points that it can change in a heartbeat.
There's a lot of legwork you have to do to get to that point.
Yeah, so that's just a idea that I'm currently weighing in my head. Unfortunately, the writing process it takes me months and months to get to a scene.
Yeah, I get it. But it's cool to have those ideas to work towards, though.
Yeah, I actually recently got to one in chapter, I think it was 29, that I've been wanting to write for ages now. And basically, it's a sort of the anti-Star Trek in a sense, where the chapter is titled "Last Contact," and like is a inversion of the still often sacred First Contact. Yeah. And what happens in the chapter is basically a alien comes up to Amon, and he's expecting Amon to save his people from a coming war. Because that's just what humanity is. Humanity is the guardians of the galaxy. Ah, shit. I didn't mean to make that double entendre. But humanity is supposed to protect the galaxy. They're the selfless federation of worlds that, defeat the big bad and save the day and all that. That's how humanity is always. That's how they expect humanity to be.
Mm.
Even though humanity's been wiped out in this setting because they did serve as that role. And then you get an extremely indifferent response from Aemon. He basically says, "Yeah, go. I don't care. I'm leaving." And the alien accuses him of being a coward for doing so. And then incites a very interesting and violent reaction from Aemon. And that was a scene I kind of wanted to. I've been wanting to. It builds into a lot of what I'm trying to say with The Last Human. Not. It's not a commentary on. You shouldn't be selfless. You should be selfless. But one of the main problems is eventually you're going to run into this reality where you're sacrificing, sacrificing. And if you do it with the wrong priorities, you eventually just lose everything. And they'll still ask for more, even when you don't have any more to give.
Right.
So that was kind of a scene that I've been looking forward to a long time, to be anti Gene Roddenberry in that sense, because Gene Roddenberry's entire thing is cooperation. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say self-sacrifice, but I would say he has this very noble view of how charity works. And I'm trying to create a much more fleshed out and right-wing version of charity, because he has a very progressive and secular view of the virtue of charity, because he thinks that charity is just going to always come up good for you. It'll be good for both parties down the road.
That's a good goal to have. It's nice and concrete to be able to create that juxtaposition. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I have a dozen other scenes that are just I want to write. I just have to get to them. So I guess that's more motivation for me to write faster. King Knoll asks, genuine question, how did you hone your writing skills? Well, as with every single author ever, it began with manuscripts that will never see the light of day, because they're so cringe.
You do have to practice.
All of us got our. It feels like all of us got our start as teenagers, and we wrote some really bad fiction, and then the next time around we wrote some better fiction and better fiction. Eventually, we get to the point where we can actually, publish and do this professionally. But yeah, I have a few. There's only, I think, 3 people in the entire world have read it. But I wrote a 150K word fantasy novel, originally titled Disciples of the Dragon, later The Child of Ash. And I worked on it for like 3 years. And unfortunately, it just wasn't good enough to publish. It's finished. It's completely finished and polished, but I just took a look at this product and said, I just can't release this. So yeah, I never. Yeah, it's a shame, but it's all of us authors have a manuscript that never saw the light of day.
Yeah. When the first time that I wrote and really loved it was back I was 9 years old, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of panicking. But there was a classroom assignment. We all had to try to write poems. And a substitute, not a substitute, it was a teaching assistant that was willing to sit with me a little bit longer while I tried to work on the assignment, and took me out in the hall and just was patient and allowed me the room or comfort that encouraged me or gave me the space for inspiration. And I wrote some poem about the weather, and then that poem, as it happened, got read to the graduating seniors. And I was moved by that. Then that same year was the first time that when I wrote a story, I read it aloud to the class and got applause. I had written a story that was something only a 9-year-old could make, but effectively I was actually channeling things that were happening, things that were happening around me. I wrote this little story about a young boy whose parents are arguing, and he runs away from home and gets stuck in a cave, finds a dinosaur egg, and then is beset by a flood. And eventually he takes the dinosaur egg up to the top of the cave and basically waits for the flood to go away. And I can't remember if it ended with the parents ultimately finding him, but the conclusion ultimately was the resolution of the conflict between the parents, which is just my wish as a child, effectively being put on paper, but still. And then I kind of made the conscious decision at that point, when I was 9, that I wanted to be a writer. And I think ultimately, even though for some reasons that really hasn't panned out as a writer, I think it was the reason people liked my story had something to do with the way they liked me telling it. And ultimately, I've grown more towards that direction of being a storyteller, and hopefully I can honor the words that people give me and communicate their intentions accurately.
Yeah, it's always a rough climb to get to like that point where you're producing better and better work. I mean, there was a ton of stuff I wrote early on, like even earlier than that first manuscript. There was a point. There was a very like what
was it mostly Star Trek fan fiction?
No, it wasn't actually. I've never written a single letter of fan fiction ever. I was always obsessed with doing my own original thing.
That's good. That's wise.
I sometimes wonder though if I should write fan fiction, because that seems like an easy way. That's tangent for like later down the line, I guess. But
well, it's an interesting goal to write someone else's character and see if you can do it. But it's still more appropriate to create your own and to learn that process.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with fan fiction is it allows you to do the hard part of gaining audience investment very easily. Basically, because since the audience is already invested in said IP, right? You can write a fan fiction in it, and if it's very easy to sell people on a story that they already like. The hard part about fan fiction is you can't monetize it, and you can't really do anything with it. I guess nowadays you can use Patreon or whatever and monetize it that way. But for the longest time, it's not yours.
Right.
And something about that always struck me as I always wanted all my stories to be mine.
Yeah, and that's just wise. What people should aim for. It's actually a little bit, I think, to add though, it's a little harder for someone whose work feels derivative of something else or feels too inspired from something else to gain traction. Because someone will just say, I don't care if Star Wars is in a terrible shape right now or if it's being done awfully. They would still prefer to purchase or indulge in the official Star Wars content, even if it's bad, than something that was inspired by Star Wars when it was good and different, because it might still feel too much like it's a derivative work or something like that.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think the Thrawn, like I literally saw the Thrawn books in the shelves of a store, and they're selling well, at least well enough to be on there on bookshelves.
Yeah.
People are still invested in the old universe. I mean, if I had my start writing fan fiction, it would probably have been with Star Wars, just because it's a very free setting.
Mine, I didn't do it too often, but mine was Bionicle.
Oh, okay. I've heard of it. I never got invested in it like I did other.
Man, it was a once in a lifetime experience. You can never have it again. Basically, it is the lore is that complicated.
Yeah, I hear stuff from my mutuals on Twitter.
There's like 13-hour descriptions of all of the events that happen in the story, and furthermore, like all of the canon events, etc., are spread out in different mediums too. So you couldn't the closest you could get from understanding the narrative was reading the books that came out for young adults or for kids, really. But the main story writer was actually more of a comic book writer in his passions. So it was kind of an unfortunate book that had so unfortunate overall narrative that had a lot of heart that really came through to everyone that liked it, including and especially in that first Flash game that came out, the Matsunui online game, because it just had the essence of the whole thing, of what was compelling about the whole story, and then it kept going for over a decade. It was 13 years or so, and it had a rushed ending, but they had to fight in order to actually give it closure and an ending. And then when they tried to revive it, it didn't pan out just because the tone was too different, effectively. But the thing that made it powerful was really, I think, just the contrast and the intrigue of these robots, effectively living on an island that all seemed to have a spiritual core to them. They were all clearly robotic, although whatever the lore is saying that they're biomechanical, it doesn't come across that way in the medium, of course, because it's Legos. But the story was biological chronicle turned into bionicle, So it was like emphasizing or suggesting something about the biological or whatever and its connection to the spiritual or something like that. And that was kind of what was interesting about those stories. They had that connection to their great spirit, Montanui, and all that, and et cetera, and the grand plots that occurred, all this. I'll stop rambling about Bionicle, but it really was. It was probably the most interesting story that came out for millennials, I guess.
Anyway. Oh gosh, I can't even. I don't even know what the most interesting story for Gen Z would be.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good question because I think they're still trying to find
that. Hopefully, it'll be The Last Human.
Hey, maybe. Well, even with millennials, it's tough because I think I don't know. I have this Twitter thread I have not made that's talking about superhero movies because I got like a juxtaposition of two movies that I think encapsulate the flaws of like two whole generations, and then I have this notion of how that's also affecting millennial writers and Zoomer writers, etc. But I don't need to go on that tangent. It is interesting to see how writers from different generations approach like their thematic cores and everything, though.
Yeah, I found that I'm very people describe my writing as very cynical, and that's true to a certain extent. But I've always tried to find a redemptive core at the heart of my stories. You can see this in Domes of Calrathia. You can see it in The Last Human.
I don't know if cynical is the right word, because cynical would kind of imply some expectation of a terrible fall that's going to occur, right? Like if you have a cynical disposition, you're thinking none of this is going to work out. It's all going to be terrible at the end. It's all just going to world's going to fizzle out. I don't care, But pretty much all of the two stories I've worked on for you, they're for all the grit involved. They're ultimately about how some heroic figure will have that power to do right in the universe. In these cases, through violence, but ultimately there still is that notion of a heroic figure correcting a fallen world, effectively. I hope that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
And I think with I don't know with Boomer. I don't know. I guess I'll go into my tangent if that's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So I have two movies that came out like 20 years apart or so. There's, well, and you can correct me on the dates because I just forget them, but there was Spider-Man 2002 from Sam Raimi. And then there was Spider-Man. Is it No Way Home or Homecoming that has the reunion of the three Spider-Man actors?
No Way Home. I
No Way Home.
remember because my little brother forced me to go watch that movie.
Ah, well, the writers for these two movies are two separate generations. You have a writer for Spider-Man 2002 is a boomer, and Gen X, two Gen X writers wrote the No Way Home. And I think ultimately, between those two movies, you have a complete reversal of moral framework. They have completely different and opposite ideas of the characters, and they are and opposite morals for the audience in general to consume. And it's not necessarily to say like, oh, they intended for you in to take like a very specific literal message, at least in one of those cases, but they because at least with Spider-Man 2002, I might say that they just wanted to entertain, maybe, but I feel that there's very clearly a political allegory in No Way Home that is basically an immigration allegory from two Gen X writers that were making some argument. That's why the final conflict takes place with the Statue of Liberty. And it's like, oh, what we need to do with the villains, we're not allowed to just send them back, like Doctor Strange says, even though all of this is my fault as Spider-Man. And if I just listened to Doctor Strange, none of this would have happened. But actually, we need to fix the bad guys before they're allowed to go home, before they're allowed to go to their other universes or just anywhere that's not the United States, this universe, and everything like that. I think it's very clearly making a political point. But the thing is, I think with the original Spider-Man, there's I think both of the movies, first of all, have like their flawed assumptions of the worldview of their generations. So with the boomer written movie, there's the context, there's like the overall story. It's trying to say something meaningful. It's trying to say something, trying to give you a meaningful story that you can enjoy, and you see that relationship between all these characters. It's very familial and long grown, but the thing that falls flat in that trilogy is the romance between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, in part because Mary Jane is actually Gwen Stacy, but that's a whole marketing thing instead. But the thing with it is like this expectation of how Peter Parker's life would turn out based on the morals that he chooses in the story. And so the fundamental assumptions of the narrative of the writer is flawed. And that's why ultimately, even though there's studio meddling that messes up with Sam Raimi's vision for the whole arc, the trilogy ultimately ends with Mary Jane and Peter almost falling out completely, but maybe being able to reconcile at the end as friends, and maybe down the road potentially they could get back together romantically. But all you have is like a bittersweet note of they're willing to try to comfort each other while they're grieving, instead of the celebration of their achievement of the achievement of their romance, or the maturity of their romance. But so like the idea is ultimately sterile. It can't bear fruit because the assumptions of those characters is just fundamentally wrong. So it's like, but it's trying to do that. It's trying to pitch this heartfelt romance between these characters, and it can't accomplish it. And there was a juxtaposition I was trying to make between the two. Yes, it's the advice given to Spider-Man. So Peter Parker's given advice, the usual speech: with great power comes great responsibility, from Uncle Ben. So in Spider-Man 2002, when he does not listen to Uncle Ben's advice, he gets Uncle Ben killed, and that's what asserts the authority of that missive, and will guide him as a hero going forward. In Spider-Man No Way Home, some 20 years later, written by a different generation, when he does listen to that same advice, it gets Aunt May killed. So it's an utter counterpoint. It's not a refutation of the original movie. And so it's just a generation kind of rejecting the one that came before. And it ultimately, to me, feels a bit more like the cynical representation of Gen X, as it were, as writers. And I'm going to be, I guess that's a bit harsh for me to say, but still, it's like the things you hear from, and I hate generational arguments. I don't like getting into them. I don't have any pride of my generation, but like as a thing that informs me as a person, I don't care to be called a millennial and say, oh, it gives me value. But the people that I hear, like boomers, just kind of, they want their ideas to be true, even though they're not. But Gen X will go on a Twitter nowadays and they'll be saying stuff like, we're badass Gen X because we don't care. But the reason we just rejected everything. We were punks and we went against the system or whatever, and not really, but whatever. And it's just like the rejection of the fundamental idea is there, and it's poison. It's poison too, like Spider-Man in this case, because you don't even feel that, I'll put in air quotes, sacrifice that he has with the Mary Jane, the MJ romance being gone at the end of that movie, because he doesn't really need to make the sacrifice to begin with. Once the whole conflict resolves, he's actually like everything is fixed. He's actually able to just go talk to her and say, "Hey, I'm Peter Parker," and start the relationship with her again. He actually can. He can just do it. He's not actually gaining anything. He's not doing anything noble. He's not actually making a sacrifice at the end. Like, there's a claim that an audience might make, but he isn't. And so it's also just kind of a sterile movie in a way to me too, because you just have a rejection of like what's fundamentally there. Even in like the conflict with that movie, you have Tom Holland about to impale the Green Goblin or whatever, and he gets stopped by Tobey Maguire, and then but the next thing that happens after Tobey Maguire says stop and everything is Tom Holland trying again to kill not just the Green Goblin, but he's trying to take that same glider and continue his movement, which could theoretically cause harm to his mentor figures that appeared in this movie. So he wants to continue again to kill the Green Goblin and go against his moral framework, as it were, or what's supposed to be his moral, and to kill Tobey Maguire as well. So it's like, okay, I think that was a bad choice, either from the actor or the director or the writer. I don't know who, but it's a sour note for me watching that. And for me, it's just like that last movie is not about the heart of a romance. It's about the utility of it. It's about the use of that story for a political point. It wants to affect the audience. It wants to have like its meaning or value and how useful it is. So it wants to affect the audience to take the moral position on the immigration allegory, which oddly enough, their position or their point of view is not even really on like the same wavelength of anyone in modern day or the current left, but it's still there as like, that's the thing that they care about. And if they were making a conscious decision to write more moderately, that was their attempt or whatever. And it's like, people can go back home or whatever. The immigrants can leave the United States, but wouldn't it be better if their lives were improved and they could go back home and fix their own countries thanks to all the hard work we put them through here, or something weird like that. I'll stop there because I feel I might be deviating too much into current political topics.
Yeah, it's
sorry,
I
have
don't
more
even
musings about millennials. I think millennials are just lost. I don't think they have anything. I think they're just trying to replicate things that Gen Xers or Boomers did, and I think anyway. Sorry.
See, here's the thing with the Spider-Man movies. I didn't even read that because I had my brain turned off the entire time because, again, I was forced to watch that movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically told, hey, you got to go watch this movie. I was like, okay.
Sorry.
I wasn't even following it enough to. I bet in the trailers they revealed that there are going to be more Spider-Mans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't even watch the trailers, so that came as like a total like left out of left field for me.
Yeah. As far as how the Amazing Spider-Man movies would fit into that analysis, it just doesn't. I'm sorry to say, because I didn't watch them at all. Uh, I I was only kind of remotely interested in Homecoming or No Way Home because of the buzz around it, I guess, and enough people said they liked it, and then I watched it and I didn't like it, and that's ultimate. And then I ultimately went through my interpretations, etc., all that.
I
But
mean, as far as just turn this back to the last human. You
sorry, man.
said, no, it's perfectly fine, and I think it actually leads to an interesting conversation topic. Is a lot of ideology handed down to younger generations was eminently false. Younger generations called older generations out on the more uh, what's the kind of word, naive elements of this ideology. And I guess we're coming up on Gen Z. Like the culture is still dominated by millennials. Like whenever someone says, "Oh, hey, Gen Z culture is trash," I guarantee you that this movie,
So,
this TV show, was not written by anyone from Gen Z. It was written by millennials. Like
mhm.
millennials are still like completely 100% in like I can't think of a single Gen Z director. I can think of a few Gen Z actors, but you haven't seen this generation produce any content yet outside of YouTube, TikTok, and yada yada.
To be honest, I still uh, now I am not a perfect critic on this because I just seldom consume so much of what's out there. You know,
Yeah,
so
me too.
what's a popular thing? I don't necessarily know what that show is, but I still don't. I don't know if, and I'd have to have like a flow chart of like which writers for this project were Gen X or Millennial or Boomer, etc. Um, it's curious. I just think millennials, in terms of like what shows are going on, if people are complaining about millennial writing, it's usually still in a property that's not of the millennial generation. It's still something that's just being continued or perpetuated from previous generations. I think of Star Wars, etc. And so I feel like, so I don't have the identity of that new property, that new idea that was something this generation made and that came from like a soulful reflection of how they grew up. I'm still kind of looking for that. I don't know what that is. Well, not looking actually. I'm sorry to say, but I don't know what that is, if it exists.
I mean, if to bring this conversation back to the last human and Gen Z writers, I mean, what I was attempting to do with book one, Last Human, was I just the general project overall is just to take the entire science fiction genre as I've read it and sift through it, see which elements I find true and which elements I find false. Um, so there's a lot of there's a lot of criticism of Star Trek in there. Um, there's a lot of criticism of I guess
Yeah, I think it it comes across as a, don't take this wrong, don't take this as a jab, but it comes across, I think, as a Zoomer work.
what defines a Zoomer work in your opinion?
I I think there's a, well, I think there's a frustration with the nonsense and there's a desire for a solution that might be very one size fits all, at least in the hook given to the audience, and that is just kind of craving a, for the stupidity or noise to just kind of go away, you know. Uh, so that's, I don't know. I I think maybe I'm just letting my own biases get in the way because like ultimately, you you don't write stories based on your connection with this is my generation and therefore I shall channel etc through my Zoomer pals lending your power, my millennial friends give me your ears. You don't do that. You look at what writing there was and you're informed by the things you read and you try to communicate as good a story as you can. But I just kind of pick up on, I guess, Domes of Calrathia and The Last Human share a certain frustration, I think, from the degeneracy of the universe, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
And I
I don't
think
know.
it's
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead, man.
No, you can go ahead.
And I think it would be a disservice of me, like, to the story, for me to just say, like, they're both stories that kind of posit that a conqueror will come in and that will kind of be the solution to the problem. I think it might. I think that would be a disservice of me to describe it that way, because ultimately you have so much more of a story to tell, and so the nuances there will be picked up, like, in the actual telling of the story. But as far as like a premise, it kind of is like, if I were to grossly summarize it, it is kind of like yearning, it seems, for a strong militaristic authority, a strong figure with a capacity for violence to come in and say, "This is I am the authority on these issues, and this is the rule that we are now applying my rules to this framework. So all of you stop fucking up."
That's very funny. To give a bit, this isn't a spoiler, but so for my intended ending of Domes of Calrathia, that's sort of it's going to be like the establishing of a monastery type ending. Um, Whereas Cirrus goes on and he discovers Calrathia and he rebuilds it, and basically it's sort of more was it the Benedict option? I think that's what it is. Basically, it's him establishing an enclave to survive the apocalypse. That's what Domes of Calrathia is. Last Human, it definitely has a lot more militaristic, uh, great man of history overtones to it. But when I get to that third part of the story I was describing, I was actually hoping for it to be a lot more of a spiritual journey rather than a rather than like Caesar rebuilding the Republic,
Hmm.
or sorry, conquering the Republic, or something like that. I was the way I have it in my mind is it's more of a trying to figure out, um, because what Vass ultimately has to do is it's not really about um, it's not about saving humanity in a physical sense. It's about regenerating humanity's spiritual essence. Because if he simply, like finds a colony ship or whatever, yes, he's brought back humanity in a sense, but unfortunately, like that doesn't fix the problem. And there's no fixing the problem in a fallen universe in a permanent sense. Anyway, but
Yeah.
I was hoping the ending for The Last Human, when I finally get around to writing it, is in exploration of what can revitalize something much more than a militaristic conqueror type, even though there is certainly those elements in the story. But yeah, I haven't even begun to get there yet in terms of the commentary. There's a long way to go before then.
Ah, a heck of a long way to go. But it'll be interesting to see that explored. You know,
Yeah.
I think we all like the aesthetic of things like Souls games or whatever, but I think you've raised the point before where it's all kind of this. It's all too much of the same, where they're not going into that next step of a rebuilding occurring.
Yeah, I mean, I've criticized Miyazaki before. I guess, all right, and for him to develop as an artist, he has to step out of the civilizational collapse stage. Um, and I think for a really interesting game that I haven't seen him done before, and I haven't like seen conceptually anyone else has done before, is he needs to set a game at civilizational springtime, or to put it in, I want to see a game from him where he sets it after the collapse. But I'm not sure we'll ever get that because From Software has, unfortunately, I think, calcified in their niche, in their vision for what they want to do, and they're just going to continue making, um, various iterations upon Dark Souls and Demon Souls until
maybe.
it all goes.
Here's hoping you're wrong.
I'm hoping I'm wrong. I really hope.
Yeah.
I really hope for a game set at Civilizational Springtime, but I can't see that conceptually from the creative team.
Yeah, you have to. It can be a challenge as a writer to posit something that's new and to also pitch why it's interesting, because so much of what interests people is the conflict or the tension created in this scenario. So you have to find a way for depicting that springtime in an engaging way.
Yeah,
which isn't to say it can't be done, but yeah, it's the puzzle.
I mean, it can be done. It's just very hard because we live in civilizational winter right now. It's very hard to conceptualize.
Let's have all these vampires trying not to be parasites, you know. And, that would be its own odd thing.
Yep. I feel like this kind of wraps up the all our talking points. I would like to take a moment to open up to the chat if they have any questions about The Last Human or for Son of Sonnet's voice direction. If you have any questions, please write them now. And we'll go over them if anyone has anything. But I think we'll wrap up in the next, 10 to 15 minutes or so.
Okay. Happy to talk about anything, though, if something comes to mind. Just feel free to ask. And I'm sorry for going on a little bit long there.
Oh, no worries. I find the fun thing for me is just discussing fiction, and I love that more than anything else. And it's a shame I don't get to do it more often anymore because number one, my friends are now scattered across the country. Number two is there's not any fiction being produced that's really worth talking about in my mind. I don't go to the movie theater anymore. I don't, turn on television anymore.
Well, I'm working with a lot of wonderful audiobook writers, a lot of book writers, and we're making a lot of these great audiobooks. And all of them are magnificent stories that people should look up and everything, including Mr. Isaac Young's. If you haven't looked at all of his by now, you should. He's got 3 big stories that are out and everything. Got The Last Human and The Dooms of Calrathia. And what's that superhero story again?
Giga Heroes.
Giga Heroes, that's right. People should look at those. And I've, at least in terms of exposure to arts today, I'm enjoying the writings that I've worked with. It is, of course, my professional requirements that I not try to discuss things too often with people. Unlike, I can't discuss the writing of the books that authors give me. I just need to do the job and understand it properly. Do you have any publishing plans for a book at the moment?
Yes. So I've submitted The Last Human to ARC Press, and depending on their response, it will be published to them. If they reject me, I'll just go indie like I usually do. It's just gonna be a toss up between whether ARC Press accepts me. I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to wait for the next 6 months to get their response because that's how long publishers take with manuscripts. It's really frustrating. It's really frustrating, these long turnaround times. It's what pushed me away from submitting some of my earlier work to publishers. It's because I went and I looked at their submission guidelines, and they're like, yeah, we're going to take about 6 months to a year to get back to you.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to cut the middleman out. I already have a cover. I already have editors. I already have formatting guys. And you're going to take a huge chunk out of my royalties. And for what? And I hear nowadays you're not even going to do marketing for me either. So I was like, I'll just take my business elsewhere. I honestly, like, traditional publishing, the only major advantage it can offer to writers nowadays, and it's a shame they haven't updated their business models, but largely because they don't need to, because they're reliant on evergreen titles. But it's still a shame. The only real thing they offer to writers is we can get your book in every bookstore across the country, and we can do marketing. And it's very unfortunate nowadays that a lot of trad pub doesn't even want to do the marketing. So yeah, that's why they're stagnating.
You'd have
Sean,
like a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, Sean Schaffer. Love your work, Isaac. Wish I had your own work ethic when it comes to my own writing. Any tips for developing it as a discipline? That's a tough question.
If I can chip in very concisely, it is important to know what the rules are so that you are able to break them appropriately.
Yeah, that's. I think that's for quality of writing. I definitely agree with that. I think that's a good piece of advice. I think the main thing, and this is an interesting problem that I've tried to tackle over the past few years, is just simply trying to figure out a way to motivate just sheer work ethic and sheer production. Because I could be writing at 2 to 3 times my current pace if I was really energized to do it. But the problem is I'm not energized, so I can only really push out a chapter a week.
Sometimes life gets in the way.
It's not a matter of life for me. It's because even with my work schedule right now, which is pretty intense, I could be writing a whole hell of a lot more than I am now. But there's a few separate problems. Number one is, okay, I'm writing, but only about I have 154 followers on Royal Road right now, and I make less than $5K. Or actually, I make $5,000 a year on all my fiction projects. And just book sales, subscriptions, yada yada yada.
Yeah,
and that is like, I am definitely in the top percentile of indie authors in terms of income. But unfortunately, it's still nowhere near enough to make it my full-time gig. And on top of that, it's sort of really hard for me to make myself write when I don't have a lot of motivation to do so.
Would you recommend, even if it's, say, difficult to find motivation, would you recommend a goal of a certain target amount of words to write? Like write for...
Yeah, I'd recommend 500 to 1,000 words a day.
Okay.
That's the basic. I would recommend that. But the problem is that, all right, so let's say you're completely starting out, right? You have zero audience. I think I've built up a pretty big following over the years, but you don't even have that. You're on scratch, starting up, right? It's really hard to motivate yourself when you've got an audience of zero. I've been trying to figure out ways to overcome that problem for both myself and other authors, to try and create meaning against what seems to be a spiral that the culture is currently in right now, where original creative work is not in demand right now. It's not in demand. Like I've had to I've experienced this firsthand. Like what are the topics that dominate the mainstream? It's all the big IPs. It's all the major franchises. Indie works do not dominate the mainstream in the slightest, except maybe for video games. Well, yeah, except just for video games. But fiction writing, yeah, not a chance. And I haven't heard of any stories of indie authors going mainstream. I've heard of mainstream authors in trad pub going indie, but it's never the other way around.
Yeah.
Like Brandon Sanderson. Yeah, exactly. Like Larry Corey is another one. He's a trad pub author who went indie, but I've never heard a story of an indie author going mainstream. And so I've been trying.
Have you ever written with other people in the room, or do you like to be completely private?
It depends. I've written Last Human on my phone.
Gotcha. But if some other author, if authors were writing at the same time, even if you weren't sharing what you wrote with each other, would that be a motivating factor for you?
not particularly.
Hmm.
Um, it's an interesting problem because I see a lot of voices out there. I see so many voices out there, and they're thinking to themselves, "Why am I creating art with no one's going to see this?" And a lot of my essays have been trying to figure out an answer to that problem. Even though as I've heard that some people see my essays as trying to gatekeep and saying that your work is useless. No, it's in fact it's very much the opposite. I want as much indie work as possible. I want more product out there. Um, I'm just acknowledging the problem, but apparently some people see that as gatekeeping. Um,
Um, just by pointing out how difficult it is to make money or get an audience, or and they think
both.
that's gatekeeping, or okay,
It's just extremely difficult scene out there.
sure.
And
I
so
guess it's
far,
I guess it comes down to that ultimate motivating factor. I think we're getting a little bit away from the
yeah, the
question of how
original
to
question.
craft it as a discipline, though,
All
or how
right,
to.
so my all right, so my advice in terms of developing it as a discipline, 500 to 1,000 words a day, no matter what. Uh, writer's block doesn't exist. It's just you have to push yourself through it. Um, you have to like just write out it. If you, even if it's 500 words of absolute garbage, every instance of my writer's block was solved by getting that out there and by establishing like something concrete. I was later able to reiterate it into something that was actually acceptable in my mind. So,
To add, I think everything around you in life that it relates to your health is relevant to your ability to have a creative work on the page.
that's true.
So you need to get enough sleep. You need to eat well. You need to exercise. You need to make sure that you are in good health. And if you're struggling with writing because of any of those factors, those things need to be addressed.
And I would also lastly add that you know a lot of people say they write for themselves, and I've largely found that to be completely nonsense. Everyone writes because they want an audience to enjoy it, and when there's no audience there, it hurts. Um, I would say that you need to be able to steel yourself for that, and also to expect just expect indifference, um, and be able to write. How do I put this in the right words? You need to be spiritually strong, and you need to find ways to be strong against that indifference. That's going to come down to the personal life of the author, but I think that's the most important thing. Is you really have to find a virtue in the craft that is beyond getting praise and beyond raw number of sales. You just have to expect that. Even views. You have to find something that you go into this because you're looking for something more than that. That's probably my final piece of advice.
From an actor's perspective, it's a little bit different. So, from as an actor, you kind of have to wipe your feet at the door and not have things from the outside coming in, so you can focus on your job better. It's difficult, it's a challenge, but it is an important part of approaching the job with the right mindset. You have to be able to organize your ideas properly. So certain people have their different ways of organizing their ideas that work best for them, but you need to find that. So you might, well, like a brain map, for example, might have a list. You might just simply do an outline of how many stanzas I'm going to write and what is each stanza going to be about. Just write that separately out, and then kind of allow the meter to guide you in that first draft, etc. For example. And sorry, I'm going to look at the question. I find out like writing answers or reimagining of other created stories. Thoughts. Sorry. Sorry. I lost my answer. What was I doing? Ah, I'm sorry. The the thing with being an actor is that when you learn, you focus on it's not actually the emotionalisms. I think in a way your your recommendation comes across to me as finding like that soul or that essence to motivate you through a lot of obstacles, but or to power through them. But um, it's there, a lot comes with the analysis beforehand of acting. You have to do the work of thinking it out first, and then you kind of have to and you memorize by rote, and you kind of put all of those thoughts into muscle memory, and then you kind of stop thinking about it, and then you act. You primarily act by listening. So an actor gets into the scene, and they have to do the actions that the character does. As that within those given circumstances, that character, who they're talking to, and what they are saying to that person in the room. So there are ways that those mechanisms in play that allow the emotion to resonate. It's not about feeling that way beforehand before you go into the scene. It is rather just about a proper understanding of those components that make up that scene or that environment, that work, that relationship. Every scene has characters, they have relationships, they have obstacles and wants. They have crow, as it were. And so when you're able to understand those and have your attention on them properly and you listen, then they resonate and you more naturally are able to work and say all of those lines. So it's not just a matter of just saying the line. It's important. But you also don't need to have, you don't need to feel the utter spiritual anguish of Amon Russ in the arena as all of these robots that look, these mannequins that look like his dead friends come in and try to kill him. You don't need to feel the utter despair of Amon Russ to communicate what he's feeling or what he's doing in that scene. So there's just that's that perspective from an actor's point of view.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Let's see. What Lockwood asks, what species are the Delphian uplifted from? They're dolphins.
Oh, that's obvious. Oh, that is unfortunately so obvious. I feel terrible for not thinking about it.
Oh, wait, you didn't pick up on it?
No, I didn't think dolphin. Because you described them, the way you described them, they sounded like they felt like corpses or something floating in the water or something. And so
Yeah,
I
no,
didn't
they're
think of them as
dolphins.
like I didn't think of them as dolphins. It's so obvious, damn it. But yeah, I thought I thought they were like people that mutated in a certain direction to go back to being water breathers or something, and then like, but there's just so messed up.
Yeah. So all right. So with the Delphian, there's a lot of elements to them. But if I could give like a concrete example of what one actually looks like, because the narration isn't entirely clear. So imagine an elongated dolphin with like just a longer body, more eel like. Um, they have a dolphin face, yes, but they also have human faces grafted along the side. That's what Vast saw. Um, and I kind of left it purposely vague. And they have tails and they have fins and all that.
So wonderfully horrific.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of left it up to the reader imagination, but yes, they are uplifted dolphins.
Mm.
The faces part, that's not part of the human design, though. That is a religious element that the Delphian grafted onto themselves after the fact.
Mm.
But yeah.
The Rodeshi, they also have elongated heads, right? But they're like grays more.
Yeah, they're not all right. So they have rectangular shaped heads,
Mm.
4 eyes, um, and after that, they're vaguely tall humanoids.
Gotcha. Very, very, very tall humanoids.
Yeah.
But
If you want something of a close depiction in the mainstream, do you remember that guy from Avengers: Infinity War, the one who goes up against the wizard? I can't remember his name.
no, I don't.
Okay. If you just watch Infinity War and the gray alien, that's somewhat similar to what the Rodeshi look like.
Okay.
Um,
I earlier in our chat today, I was thinking more like the xenomorph in a way. It's like, is that what possibly it was? But okay. And and I just had the image of his really of his teeth was what stuck out to me.
oh
So
yeah, his
when
blocky teeth. Yeah.
yeah, the blocky teeth, and that just made and that so that was hopefully affecting the voice properly. But it just made me think of like a horse talking with his teeth drawn back and like a really ugly in a really ugly way.
Yeah, that's similar to what I had in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're one of the out there aliens. Oh gosh, someone asked, "Is the Marvel Cinematic
No, no.
Universe?"
The
No,
Marvel Cinematic
oh,
Universe is not required reading.
no.
It's
Oh
not
gosh,
recommended reading from my perspective either.
oh no, it's terrible. It's like a knife to the heart. Oh no, no, it's not. Oh, all right. Lockwood asks, "Was the fortune teller some kind of spider?" Actually, yes, yes, that is the
Yeah, that came
intended
across.
parallel.
Yeah.
I was with the whiskery hair on his skin and such.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, he was another insect. I like using insects as a motif for The Last Human because I find them extremely alien creatures.
So what was the intention with using the with writing the scene with the fortune teller?
Um, all right. In what way? I suppose I need a
Um
clarification.
oh, sure. I was given an impression about the tone that it was creating, or not necessarily the tone. Thank you for the compliment about the General Chiron performance. That means a lot. Uh, in so the it's hard sci-fi and all that, and I know you mentioned the spiritual component that will come into the future and like the tail end and everything, but we have more or less the confidence that people can't tell the future, but the way it's structured also creates doubt in that assessment that Vast takes. So Vast has a stance that this is not reading the future. This is actually a way that the species manipulates people and makes them do that evil act, or not evil act, but just whatever happens. But then we have the way the scene is written creates a bit of the opposite impression, so that there is some degree of, if not telling the future, seeing something within Vast that is so horrifying to that alien it causes a heart attack and kills him. So I didn't know if it was meant to create that uncertainty or if it was just supposed to state a truth about the universe. It's like the metaphysics of it or something else, as a fact that the characters that maybe is more relevant to the audience than the characters. But it creates a bit of ambiguity.
Yeah, so there was all right. So to clarify on that scene, there is nothing inherent in the Anansi species that allows them to see the future. What I was employing um, with that scene is something that Gene Wolfe does a bit. Is he takes frauds, for example, and he turns them on their head where aspects of them are actually true. So the Anansi himself, yeah, he's a complete scam artist. Like that's what he is, right?
Yeah.
But due to story elements that will come in play that have come in play actually, with events in chapters 21 through 27, um, the scam artist actually does experience a moment of seeing the future, but through a sort of a higher power. And so, he sort of becomes what he pretends in that scene, to unfortunate results.
So
And
kind of like, if you don't mind the expression, but it's kind of like Vass is touched by an angel, as it were, or by some divine element, and the con artist is able to go into his mind far enough to see that divine thing, but like witnessing the divine thing kills him.
I would structure it as something intrudes upon the Anasi's mind and shows him the future.
Okay.
It's not anything inherent in the alien himself. And I
Right,
wouldn't.
right. And I wasn't thinking of the Anansi, but rather of whatever is in Vass that is unique or whatever is that truth or whatever that is either is deadly for him to see, or if he just has like his own unique reaction to it that causes his death.
Yeah. Again, this is in chapters you haven't read yet, so I can't really elaborate on it too much.
I will go to it.
But it's where I was going with that scene was something is trying to, the Anansi is trying to intrude on the natural course of Vass's life through the mimetic hypnotic suggestion.
Yeah.
What happens is this is prevented by an unseen force that wants Vass's life to go one way and not another. And this unseen force does have this mystical ability to see into the future. And it shows the scam artist the future, which is basically everything that Vass experiences, and immediately it kills the Anansi. And this will get talked about in chapters. This will also get elaborated on in chapters 30 through 40.
Cool.
Because what the method of murder used to kill the Anansi is a mind poison. And this is it's a concept that's going to be elaborated on. Whereas something is so forceful and traumatic, it immediately kills the recipient. So Amon experienced this with Orotech, but he survived, not without a significant amount of scarring. And that's also what General Chiron refers to, and that's what they talk about in chapter 18, is Chiron is another person who's experienced enough trauma that he can like kill other people just with his, he can't kill other people, but when a telepath looks into his mind, there's enough suffering there that it could kill him. And Ingrish says, he warns Ingrish against it, and then Ingrish says Amon's worse off. And the reason Amon is worse off is because he heard the words of Orotech. And
how much of Warhammer and Dune is consciously in the book?
Not a lot, actually. That may come as a surprise to a lot of people.
I'm curious what the unconscious part of it is in the book, is what Chris has in mind.
The unconscious part is the God King elements. There's going to be memory of like genetic memory elements in The Last Human. That's in chapters 21 through 27. That's certainly Dune influenced, even though it's something I thought necessary for the story and not something specifically from Dune, but there's going to be a parallel there. Warhammer 40K, much less so. Because The Last Human is actually really inspired from Star Trek, and is famously, as I famously said, Freerin. So it's from Freerin more so than Warhammer 40K. Is as much shock as that may be to some people. Have you ever seen Freerin?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
I still read it when the chapters come out. Actually,
yeah. So if you want to know what The Last Human is primarily from, it's primarily from Freerin, because I got the idea watching Freerin. Not any of the sci-fi stories The Last Human is similar to. No, this fantasy story about an elf,
Yeah.
and the rest was just my own additions.
You know, there are a lot of stories that involve the writer's perspective on immortal characters. There are, and I think they generally go the same way with how they'll interpret things. At least the writers have things like in Doctor Who, as an example of a science fantasy, but still characters like the Doctor, or characters like there's a character in that series called Captain Jack Harkness or whatever, who ends up becoming immortal effectively.
Yeah, I watched a lot of Doctor Who.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that anything current going on with that narrative or for the past several years is relevant to the conversation, but although my general disappointment and disapproval of the overall story aside, but they kind of take the perspective of like immortality being more of a punishment, or like it wouldn't actually be worth it. Like it would drive you crazy, or it would just be a slow descent.
I mean, all right. So the truth behind that is immortality in a fallen universe is very much not worth it, because you're existing in a permanent state of corruption, right? So as a Catholic, that's the reason behind death, is because if we remained as we were in the garden in a fallen universe, we're existing in a permanent state of corruption. So that's the reason why God imposes death. And I agree with that. It's a compelling theme. What I find time and time again is that these authors, these sci-fi authors, writing for Doctor Who and yada yada yada, they externalize this their transcendental natures onto these characters. Where Doctor Who, he's sort of a representation of a much more dignified and noble form of man. He's a Time Lord, yeah. But he's not human.
Was that originally, I guess?
Yeah. And you see this with precursor progenitor species all the time. Is you have a certain nobility that is transferred onto them that humanity currently lacks. And that was one of my inversions in The Last Human, because I wanted humanity to possess that nobility of the Time Lords. Just because that more correctly fits into my worldview as a Catholic.
Yeah.
Because you have this original sin and like fall from grace, exile from the garden storyline that is not humanity's, but some other precursor race. Again, like the Time Lords. And it's very Christian. It's very, very, very Christian. The problem is it's not our story. We're the scrappy underdogs. We're the the undignified, evolved from apes. We're not the Time Lords.
Right.
Which in an actual religion, we sort of are the Time Lords in Christianity. Unfortunately, Adam and Eve happened, and it all went haywire from there. But still, you have this element of this nobility I find very compelling in fiction, and it's never assigned to us because the sci-fi authors have their own particular view of humanity. That's very materialist. But they're more than willing to give it to some fictional hypothetical in their head. So my edition of The Last Human was just reassigning that back to where I think it ought to properly belong.
It's a nice distinction in The Last Human for the humans to be the long-lived species. I don't, I guess out of curiosity, do you have any opinions or feelings in any way about the elves of Tolkien and how they're handled?
I mean, I think they're fine. The problem with elves in Tolkien is nothing that Tolkien did with them. It's what everyone else did with them.
Like everyone's taking
Yeah,
the wrong idea from it.
everyone took this essentially elves are unfallen creatures, or no, they're not unfallen, but they're a representation of mankind at a more noble period, right? And they also have this connection to the Fae, which is, rooted in European folklore and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, they're both a simultaneous image of what mankind could be at a better time, and they're a representation of unhuman creatures in a Christianized universe. All right. So basically, Tolkien is baptizing elves from folklore. All right. So you have those two elements, and they work extremely strongly. And then what everyone else did with them is the lesson they got was pointy-eared humans who live long and are pretentious. And that's all what elves are. And they're also, hippies who care about the like trees. They're tree huggers.
Yeah, you think that
And
just comes
they
from
took they took all these superficial elements of elves without any of the inner core and substance which made them compelling to begin with, and then they ran with them, and now they're a D&D race in a slider somewhere, and that's it.
Do you think they make that take that position because it's just a resentment of an ideal?
I just think they took that position because that's just their worldview. I don't think there's any intentional thought behind it. They just took a they came in with a very secular view of Tolkien's work, and what they took away was exactly that, a very superficial view of what elves were. They're just a D&D fantasy race. That's all they are. And same with dragons. I mean, like, again, you see dragons playing not only there's the material reality of dragons in Tolkien, but there's also the spiritual realities, right? And that's just completely lost on modern authors, and I find that very disappointing. Is because you keep so much of the skin and you lose so much of the substance.
Mm-hmm. Is the carapace suit? Does that feel like a Warhammer device to you?
It's a Warhammer-esque device, but I outlined my reasons for it earlier, and it's in the book where they discuss the carapace suit as the natural conclusion of trying to create an immortality or fight immortals. It's not directly inspired by Space Marines, if that's what you're asking. I don't think I had a concept of that in my head at all. It's more to do with the I want to explore the dehumanization of war and the dehumanization of going up against such an awful enemy such as the Aberrants. That is, that's a very common theme in fiction. Is we must toss away our humanity to fight monsters.
Yeah,
like that's in everything from Attack on Titan to Mass Effect. And so that was the reasoning behind the carapace suit. Which one comment: looking forward to getting more glimpses about the Aberrant Wars and humanity's halcyon days and subsequent fall. I will say the Aberrants, they're another inversion of a popular sci-fi trope. Have you ever played Mass Effect: Song of Sonnet?
I have, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
I went through the whole trilogy. I didn't go beyond the trilogy.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Liked the first game and in most every regard, and I enjoyed some aspects of the second game that was mostly gameplay only, and then I realized somewhere between that and the third game coming out that I'd been lied to, because I was effectively sold on the series, because it was, when the first game came out, it was kind of underwhelming, because it was interesting in a way. Like, I'll play it, but I won't keep it. And I thought it was neat enough for a brief time. But then I was told this idea that seemed revolutionary to me, which is like the idea of the save data going across different games and it being treated as a trilogy from the beginning. But the reality is that it wasn't. That they were just flying by the seat of their pants the entire time, and that they basically lied in marketing. That it was a different kind of story than what they were going for. And then the ending came out, and they did have to go back and try to change the ending a little bit to make it more palatable for people, because it was that bad, that much of a betrayal of fundamental notions about the series. And it just came to the ultimate realization that I'd been swindled for several years. And it's kind of like I've grown up with too many stories that that are promising to last for many, many years. I'll bring this back to The Last Human in a second. It's just like with Harry Potter is another example where that came out. I was more or less told, hey, this is going to be 7 books. And then I feel like I keep being asked to take off my assessment hat. Like, because I'll be the guy who wants to learn how to be a writer and no one's willing to teach me. But like, and then just as a viewer, I'm asked, oh, you're not allowed to think about, to judge whether these are good or not. You need to wait until the whole thing is done. And then like, okay, you're telling me to not interact with this thing that I'm supposed to love until 7 years from now, when it's supposed to be done. Then I have the full picture or whichever. And so that I find that irks me, especially once we reach the end of something. Like with Mass Effect, it is very prominent that they did not actually plan ahead, right? With Harry Potter, my feelings on that series have diminished, but I don't fanatically hate it or anything. I don't care about it anymore. I'm just done with it. I want it to be done. But and with Mass Effect, yeah, it was that specific betrayal. And I don't think that's going to happen with The Last Human, because you have that ending in mind and you have that goal and you're plotting things out properly. But like, that's part of my reflection is like, I don't want a series to go on forever. I want it to have an end. And I just don't want to be lied to about expectations for a story. And like, if you're going to make your own serialized things for a video game, if you just want them to be separate isolated things, you can do that. That's fine. Just tell me that. Just be honest. Don't tell me that it's one continuous story among 3 games and then just lie to me. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what I intentionally tried to get away from in The Last Human, was that literally I give away the ending.
Yeah.
So you already know how events fall into their proper place. You just don't know the context. But
yeah, there's a lot of emotional resolution that we're still building towards.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, you're in the story not for how it ends, but for the how and why it ends.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do, because The Last Human is going to be quite an odyssey in terms of a writing project. The interesting thing to me about Mass Effect was the idea of the Reapers, right?
Yeah.
So you have this stereotype of cosmic horror, right? Where the Reapers are so powerful, they're so beyond us. We're an insect. They're going to wipe us out, and it's not even going to be a blink of their eye, for example, right? And then in the third game, that's not the case, and they should have spent the second game justifying how the Reapers got defeated in the third game, but that's neither here nor there. Again, with The Last Human, I wanted to do a lot of inversions on classic science fiction stereotypes and tropes. Mm. And what I wanted the aberrants to be, and what they are, is they're very much focused on humanity. If I could, have you ever heard the story of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream?
Yes. I've not gone through the entire thing, but I know the plot.
Yeah. There's this super intelligence called Am,
yeah.
Right? And he's basically this hateful god that has all of his attention focused on 5 prisoners, and he wants to make them suffer for eternity because he hates humanity that much. Like, he's just like, there's a famous speech from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's called the hate monologue. Now, just imagine how powerful that monologue has to be singled out from a story, and not only singled out from a story called the hate monologue.
Yeah.
That is essentially what I want. That's my direction for the aberrants. Is there 1,000 AMs, or sorry, like 1,000,000 AMs, and each one of them is an embodiment of the hate monologue. So they're a different play on cosmic horror. They're not a cosmic indifference. They're a very much cosmic, microscopic attention on humanity and the galaxy, and all they want is to inflict suffering. And that's sort of I've been very vague. I've skirted around the details of what they specifically are and what they do, but I've given enough hints that you should have a pretty good idea. But that's their general direction. And that's why I wanted to branch off, is because every sci-fi author, they go for the cosmic indifference vibe. I wanted to go in the complete opposite direction with that, where there's cosmic horror, but the outer gods are very, very much concerned with humanity and the galaxy.
Yeah, that's better from a character writing position. It gives you more to work with.
Yeah, and for those,
indifference is something that can be commented on in fiction and be a powerful observation. But if that's the only framing that's ever used for something that is divine or pseudo-divine, it gets stale rather quickly.
Yeah, and for those who've made it into this 2-hour and 20-minute stream, I'll give one quick spoiler for what I've planned in the future. There may or may not be a chained aberrant in Amon's ship. That's going to be an interesting plot line for later. But
he's going to tell people that.
Yeah, I got to tell people that. I love spoilers.
It's going to blow up the ship or something.
It's not.
It's going to go on its hate monologue. It's going to get a chance to say it. It's been like
that's actually not what I have planned. It's going to be very different.
Say it. I need to repeat the hate monologue. All right.
It's not. It's actually no. Actually, I won't spoil that part.
No,
but there's
so he has the literal book of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
He doesn't have that. Book. He doesn't have that. But
no, I know. But I was like, I'm just joking. He should have that book right next to the aberrant.
Yeah, but I deliberately leave a lot of things, like Vaz says something like, the Authorial doesn't need a gigantic computer mainframe, but he never elaborates why and why Cargo Bay 13 exists. And the reason it exists is because Amon essentially has the computing processing power of an aberrant running the ship.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of other things, especially with Tut. Tut's one of my favorite characters, where Vaz says, "Oh, by the way, the all-powerful technology of mankind, that was not enough for the Belazar people. They wanted something more." And then I just left it at that, without any context.
Yeah.
It's gonna come up. It's gonna come up.
Cool. That'll be exciting. Tut's kind of fun. It's just fun how utterly terrified Vaz is of him. It's sort of it's almost odd the way that it's done. It's so insistent. It's like Tut I don't know, Vaz can ponder about all the horrible things that he does. Or not that he does, but that he sees in life, that he experiences. But man, Tut is the most terrifying guy ever.
I mean, one day I'm going to commission art of Tut, and you're going to understand exactly why he feels that way, because Tut is utterly horrifying to look at.
I get it's a physical thing. It's just it seems to imply there's potentially more about his personality that's actually dangerous.
There is. Like if I were to explain Tut real quick, I wanted So when I wrote this as sort of a divergence from Star Trek, for example, basically the point of Star Trek is to unify all alien races everywhere under the banner of the Federation. All right?
Mhm.
That's basically what they want. Is they want one unified liberal collective. Tut is the antithesis to that because he is an alien that is fundamentally incompatible with humanity and other aliens. Like he is something. He's not evil in the sense, but like, all right. So if you know me as a Catholic author,
but archetypally, he is kind of like your token evil character in the team.
so the way, all right. So I have a lot of questions of how my Catholicism relates to the Last Human, right? So in my universe, there are alien species, and there are true alien species, and there are alien species uplifted from Earth. Tut is a true alien species, and of the true alien species that appear in the setting, they have their own original sins attached to them.
Okay.
So, and the consequences of those sins is they cannot exist in a harmonious state with mankind, as they were originally intended. And so, what happens with that is they are on a fundamental metaphysical level. They are incapable of coexisting with mankind. And the fact that they do coexist causes simultaneous damage to both the Belazar and the human.
Okay.
And yeah, that was the main inspiration for Tut. And he's going to be a source of a lot of theological dialogue throughout the novel. But that's what I really wanted to get across, because again, with Star Trek, it's a universe where everything can coexist peaceably. I wanted an alien where that just is not possible on any sort of level.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about? You wanted to wrap up like half an hour ago.
Yeah, that's true. I'll leave it open for one more minute for any last second questions, and then I think we're going to close out the stream.
All right.
But thank you all for listening. Thank you all for your very kind comments on The Last Human. I deeply appreciate it. It has been, even to get to 85,000 words, it's been a tremendous lot of work. And I really appreciate that you've enjoyed it. It's the most greatest. It is literally the greatest and most humbling thing as an artist to have someone else enjoy their work. It's kind of why the whole thing was made to begin with, is for other people to enjoy it.
Yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed us talking and everything.
Yep.
Thanks for coming by. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really glad. I hope we can. I guess I hope we can do this at the end of every major story arc to discuss the progression of the story.
Sure, that'd be a lot of fun. I like talking about stories. I don't really generally have a lot of opportunities to do so.
Yeah, me neither.
And that's why I'll go on big rants about specific movies.
But it seems that we've come to an end of all the questions and comments.
Indeed.
Thank you all for listening so much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you later.
See you later. See you, Isaac.